Good morning and welcome to Sunday Coffee. Joining once again my co-host, the future governor of Virginia, TK Eppley. On this morning's episode, we are going to be having a conversation about how we shouldn't let fear talk us out of greatness. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Good morning, TK. How's it going?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I feel great.
No other way to feel, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. Had the last Wednesday show, Whiskey Wednesday show that I did, I was kind of feeling kind of foggy, like all right, something's going. Things just weren't like going all that right. And actually, I had I had the Ninja on and Ravi, who now just goes by RB because evidently I've been saying his name completely incorrect, and I'm just unable with the American tongue to say his name correct, and he never once corrected me. So I'm like, all right, but I work with his sister, and she's like, no, it's like Rovi or something like that because it's like pronounced with like two A's or something. I have no idea. But I'm like, nope, he's now RB. Well, and I had, and so RB is the oldest, then it goes Rainu, who I work with, and then we had our younger sister on, who is a fraud investigator for the SEC, and we were, talking about all these different things. And then, I'm like, all right, nothing's working right. Well, this morning I just realized, I'm like, oh, hell, I forgot to put it on the focus, the single focus camera. I had it on the normal show camera. I'm like, well, messed that one up, but at least I got the intro right this time. I started thinking about the show's topic, the other day, and while you've spoken somewhat about this also in the past, which is, the big reason why you made it through Buds is just because you didn't quit, and that you shouldn't let anyone talk you out of your dreams, including yourself. And it may seem somewhat unusual, but I have an irrational fear of getting a shot or an IV. But tattoos don't bother me. Like, I can sit there all day long, go to work. I don't know the reason why, whatever it is. But I got diagnosed with COVID, and as a man of science, I already knew what my path was going to be in the event that I got diagnosed with COVID. Like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down the path of, I've got an infrared sauna. I'm going to do that. Like, basically live in there, because it gives you, whether or not people want to say it's anecdotal evidence, whatever it is, I believe it. Certainly, if you're getting a sweat on and you're getting those rays, there's a positive immune system response.
I'm with you on that.
If I had a steam sauna, I'd be doing that one as well. I would literally go from one to the other and just, keep going. And then I knew I would do monoclonal antibody infusion and steroids. Like, that was my plan, and that's what I was going to do. And got diagnosed. Now, here's the one small little piece of information that I didn't really look at until after I, had the monoclonal antibody treatment. Because that's all I'd ever said was monoclonal antibody treatment. Didn't realize that, hey, this wasn't like some pill I could just take. Like, it's done either through 4 shots in 4 different parts of the body, or through an IV. And I'm like, all right. And I have this irrational fear of...
And you had to man up.
Yeah, so the morning I'm supposed to get the treatment, I'm like, yeah, feeling pretty good. Nope, not according to this Oura ring. I'm not feeling very good because it's telling me.
According to your irrational, you're feeling fine.
Yeah, according to my irrational fear, I feel great. I'm on my way there, and I'm like, oh, it's 30 minutes to this place. I don't know. I've gotten kind of spoiled being out here in the Midwest now. 30-minute drive means it's 30 miles. I'm like, it's 30 minutes there. Gotta wait another hour and a half. I'm like, no, let's go. I show up. I'm like, no, I'm feeling pretty good. Like, I read the fact sheet, and I'm like, oh, I don't want this. Because like one of the facts on there was something like, this could enter. This has not been properly researched, and therefore it may reduce your natural immune response to a future COVID infection. I'm like, I don't want that. I'm like, I would just go and get another treatment. Like that's, but I'm like, because they say, hey, it hasn't been researched on the fact sheet. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm like, no. Let's just do it. So I tell the tech, I'm like, hey, look, I have this, because you also do it in your car. Like you're going into an ambulance bay, the tech's there doing it. And so I tell the guy, I'm like, look, I got this irrational fear of needles. Like it's bad. He's like, well, I'm like, look, normally I got to give blood or anything like that. I'm laying down, or they put me in the recliner, and good to go. So, and of course, I'm also difficult in that. I know that may be surprising to many of you out there. But I don't want the IV in my left arm. It's got to be in my right arm. Because I know.
You got a better vein over there?
No, but it's all the same. And I will not have it done in my hands. I'm like, nope, you're not doing it in my hands. They always also want to do it in your hand. I'm like, nope, not in my hands.
You know why? Why?
No idea.
So when you start giving IVs, especially if you're going to be in the hospital, you start at the hands, and that way, if you have a blowout in the vein there, like which can happen around, like just depending on how you put it in, especially like if you're using a butterfly, and if I have it in the hand, and something goes wrong, I can keep moving up your arm. So if I start here, I got nowhere to go but up, right? And so you got to be in line. This is why they like to start here. Plus, if it's something that has to stay in you for a while, having in your elbow is it takes a chance for bending it. It's just you've got to be much more careful. If I put it in my hand, most people have really good veins on the top of their hand.
Oh, I definitely do. And I definitely don't ever want it there because, again, this is irrational fear and, not happening.
Well, the word is irrational, right? That's the operative word.
Yeah, I can't get over that. So he's like, all right, he walks me through it, bam. And, of course, he's like, all right, we're not going to start the infusion. I'm going to give you a few moments just to, calm back down. And he's like, look, if we start this and you start feeling this way, we'll just stop. I'm like, that's like, no, I don't have to worry about that. Like, unless I have an allergic reaction, I don't need to stop. Like, once it's there and I'm back, I'm like, I'm fine. I just, it's that. Right. But it's so bad. And of course, dummy me, forgot like to bring, a change of t-shirt, because when I say it's irrational, like I look like I just got out of the sauna. I'm like sweating everywhere. And so,
that's humorous. I mean, I understand that, like, intrinsically, I understand people have that, but like, just because I don't have that, it's just, like I go to the hospital, I go to the doctor, and they want to do it. I'm like, hey, do it in this arm, not this one, because I got a better vein, and I'm talking them through it.
Yeah. So get it done, and he's like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I've got the seat back up. And I'm like, hey, I'm once it's in, and especially not in my hand. So the whole reason I can feel it all the constant, because I'm always like moving. I'm like, if it's in my arm, I can be like, I can just rest and I'll be fine. So he comes over and he's like, all right, you're done. How, is there any issue? I'm like, no, I have zero issues taking it out. It's only, only when you're putting that, which is also a reason why I'm like, all right, I could probably do 4 shots. Like, no, it would have been even worse probably for me. So, I get done. They observe you for, about an hour, and, felt fine. The next morning I woke up, yeah, hey, feel great. But that aspect of, I'm always reminding all the kids that, there's no real difference between the coward and the hero. They both feel the same fear. It's just one goes towards it and the other one runs away from it.
Yep.
And I was doing everything in my mind. I feel great. No, let's not be dumb. Let's just get this treatment because it's effective. And I think I read something as in some of the studies, as high as like 98% effective.
Right.
Nope. Just let's get this thing done, because then you don't have to worry about this blowing up. Hey, look, the way I basically kind of reading it is that, and I won't say it's just like the flu, because the flu doesn't have necessarily any long-term lasting effects, but there are people out there when they get, COVID, they've got some long-term lasting effects, and
right.
Hey, that's their genetics. So I have no idea what might happen. So hey, there's a valid treatment out there that's authorized by the FDA. Got it done in the face of fear. So I started going, I wonder what else.
Overcame your fear of a 26 gauge needle. You were.
I didn't overcome it. I just said I'm going to do it anyway because I still fear it.
You did in the immediacy to do the right thing, right? To do what's best for you, right? And I think that's, fear can be a great motivator. It can also be the biggest detriment in your life, right? I tell people all the time, if you're fearful or angry, you can't be great. And it's how people manage that and what it manifests itself in, and most times when people are fearful, they get angry because they're mad at themselves, because they're like, why am I mad? Why am I fearful of this? Right? Or like, why am I weak or anything else? When I was going through SEAL training, I had a buddy that it's like, it's not the last day of Hell Week, but it's close. And we're all in the pool, and like, he just gets up and he starts walking away. Like, he gets out of the pool and starts walking away. Like, I've had enough of this. Like, he's going to go quit somewhere. And I'm like, where are you going to go to quit? Right? We're in the pool. And one of the instructors looked at us and we're like, no, don't. Like, and he just basically shouldered him back into the pool. He was like, he was walking along the side of the pool. And the instructor just like bumped into him and knocked him back in the pool. And he swam back over to us. He was fine. We never talked about it again.
Until right now.
He just had this momentary, I'm walking off the job. This is BS. I'm not doing it anymore. And the minute somebody literally shocked him back into, he was like, oh, I don't want to do that. And it's like, we never brought it up. He never brought it up. And it's, 30 plus years later. And, he's one of us, right? He made it through, and everybody else, But I would say that, most people that quit in life at things, it's because of fear. It's not like, because what's the fear of failure, right? I mean, I can work with people that are afraid to fail, because you're going to say, but if you're afraid to succeed, because that's the other thing. Some people are like, what happens if I'm successful? And if you're afraid to succeed, that's harder, because you're going to self-sabotage all along the way, because you want to manifest your thoughts, right? Well, if you're afraid to fail, we can work with you. Getting somebody who's afraid to succeed is a much more difficult task to get them on working and be successful.
Yeah, I've never had a fear of success. And I'm not scared to fail at anything either. I think if I had to put down in terms of doing something, I have more of a, I would say, fear of missing out. All right, if I don't do this, what could possibly happen?
What rung in the ladder am I going to miss? Right.
Right.
I don't. It's funny because the whole FOMO thing. Like, I don't with people and parties and being out and social. I don't none of that bothers me.
Yeah. That's not it.
There's like career wise and stuff. It's like, what am I missing? Like, what am I not doing today? What am I? How can I elevate myself? Right.
Yeah.
but and I, but that's a lifetime of achievement, right? That you want to make for yourself, right? And um, I high achievers are always worried about opportunity, lost opportunity or opportunity cost, and what do I have to put in it to get that opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, like the thing that that I guess really actually gets me fired up, like with the distiller, the fact that the experts that I hired didn't do the right thing caused me to have an opportunity loss.
Right.
It put me behind 3 months. Like right now, I've got uh, roughly 120 gallons fermenting, and I still got to run them, through the stills,
Yeah.
things like that. This should have been 3 months ago. And
So let me ask you this. So what you said this before? I don't remember the exact thing. What is the average time from hey, I got a great idea, I want to make whiskey, to people making whiskey? Because you did a big shortcut on that.
yeah, so I don't know what the average is off the top of my head, but I remember the quote from the president of the American Distillers Institute, who has said he has an ongoing, basically, bet out there to the industry that anyone that can get up and running in their own operation, that's the key, because there's plenty that can go white label. I can go hire someone to make my product for me, and you can have that done, tomorrow, basically.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a little bit, not tomorrow, but
Maybe next week.
yeah, it doesn't take long, because the TTB doesn't have the same requirements for someone that's white labeling. It might take a couple of months. Anyway, so his ongoing bet is that he will buy anyone dinner that can get up and running in their own operation in less than 2 years.
And you guys did it in how much? 11 months, I think.
1 year, 3 days.
Okay, so in the bigger arc, yeah, you're pissed off because there was a 3 month, in your mind there was a 3 month opportunity cost, but you're still how much farther ahead than everybody else.
I feel like I should be in the the top, the 5 percentile, and so that should have been done in 6 months.
No, I got it. That's what I'm saying. That's where kind of the success arc, right, happens, is because somebody told you it had to be done that 2 years was really running it. You did it in a year, and now somebody makes you wait 90 days and you want to choke them out, right? I mean, that's that concept of how the success arc works and why people are successful or ultimately are not successful.
Yeah, and with that, it's just doing the distillery. Like, this is the same thing with anything. I can't tell you how many people have tried to talk us out of it.
Well, that's in general. I mean, everybody's like, "Oh, you'll never make it." Well, and you've heard what I said about what my mom said when I went to go be a SEAL, right? She's like, "What happens when you quit?" And statistically, she was correct, right? But at that moment, I was like, "Hey, I'm either going to die or I'm going to make it through, and either one of them is on you." My dad was like, "That's really cool." And I walked out of the room and I was done talking about it, right? But you get, people can motivate you in strange ways to be successful. Right? And I think one of the best ways to motivate somebody, for me personally, is when somebody says, "Hey, you can't do that." Then I'm like, "Oh, now I have to do it," right?
Yeah.
I can't not do it.
I'm like, "What do you mean can't?" Like, I may choose not to do it, but I can't.
Right. What happens when you quit, right? And if she would have said, "If you quit," then it was me like, "Hey, what does the Navy expect of you?" Right? That's what I would have taken. But when she said, "When you quit," she made the assumption of failure.
Yeah.
And
I know all the statistics out there. Three out of every 10 businesses close their doors within the first 3 years, and then very few even make it past 5.
Right.
I think many people fail when it comes to trying to do a business because they do it. It's about the money.
Right.
And rather than
lifestyle, and there's what people expect, and sometimes when those things are vastly different,
yeah,
it messes with your head.
because and I've told this to all of my people: never take a job just for the money. It just doesn't turn out well. And there was a post on social media. Someone said, like basically, be honest. Do you need money? No, I don't need it. I need things that money can provide, like food, shelter. But money's not my goal. Like if I were to become, if all of a sudden I somehow won, the lottery and had $30 million sitting in the bank or $300 million, it's not going to change who I am. I'm going to be the exact, actually, the only thing that will change is I would be able to do more things of what I want to do that would give back. Like the first thing would be, like the very first thing, if all of a sudden I won the lottery, the very next day, I'm going to law school. The very next day.
It's funny because this is a lot with athletes, like professional athletes, but money doesn't, it's like struggle doesn't form character, it reveals it.
Yeah.
Right? Money just makes you more of who you are. If you're a good person, you're going to be a good person. You're going to be a better person. You're going to you're going to give yourself. If you're an asshole, you're going to be a bigger asshole.
Yep.
Right? Because that's all money does, right?
Yeah. It's true. And and people have always asked, like, well, why would I want to go be a lawyer? Well, because I never want to retire. But many years ago, I read this book called How to Argue and Win Every Time by Jerry Spence. And Jerry Spence is arguably
legendary.
Yeah. A defense attorney that defended Imelda DeMarco, but he went to the most prestigious law school of the University of Wyoming. And it clicked for him one day. But he said he never asked any of his, at least in the book, he never asked any of his clients if they did it or not. He just had to believe that they didn't. He would interview them, and if he believed that they didn't do it, then he took on the case.
Well, with that, he's just like most defense attorneys, he has a strong belief that no matter what you may have done or who you are, everyone deserves a vigorous defense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And I think that drives him as much as it drives, I'm the deal. It's like, don't ask people questions you don't want to know the answers to, right? And so, how does that, if you ask somebody, did you do it, and they say yes, well, how does that affect your defense of them?
Right, because now they're guilty.
Yeah.
And so the reason I would go to law school and I would try to go to the best one I could get into is because I would do nothing but pro bono work. I would just look to defend people who the government has overreached. People who
the system is working over.
Yeah. I firmly believe that there's plenty out there. I mean, look, it was really enlightening to me when I was doing my master's at George Washington, where we had a prosecuting attorney for the Department of Justice was one of our professors, Clem McGovern.
Great name.
Yeah.
Gotta love anybody named Clem.
He was, I thought he was a great professor, and he was very honest. And he's like, look, only for the most part, 15% of any person charged with a crime ever actually goes to trial. And I'm like, all right, why is that? He goes, because a prosecuting attorney for the government doesn't want a loss on their record. And so, yep. He goes, so almost everything gets plead out, so that way it's not a loss, it's a win. I'm like, all right, tell me more. He goes, well, very few times do we have, like, as a prosecuting attorney, we want to make sure that we've got like at least a 99% probability of conviction. I'm like 99%. And he goes, oh yeah, too many things can go wrong.
Well,
And
it starts with jury of your peers, and peers is in air quotes.
yeah, right. And so we started digging into a lot of the different like cases, like, and we really broke down like the O.J. Simpson trial and why O.J. was found not guilty. And it's like,
Right.
look, because the primary thing was, when they panned the room, there was like a glove or a sock, something like that, on the like banister of the bed, and when they panned back, it wasn't there. Crime scene has been tampered with. Like, right, that little thing right there,
Yeah.
boom, gone. And you start looking at everything, and we I don't know how many different cases we went back and looked at, and it's so when I see certain trials go on and people get outraged, and I'm like, well, Professor McGovern was right again. They rushed it to trial. This was political. And you can go, yep, that I could see exactly why that person was found not guilty, which is different than being innocent, because they just rushed it.
Yeah.
And
I'm a big Alan Dershowitz fan.
oh yeah, I love Alan Dershowitz as well.
It's just, I mean, this goes back, growing up as a kid in New England, he was I think, first big public trial that I remember was in the 70s, where he defended Klaus von Bülow. And, even today, like, he by all accounts was considered to be more, the liberal guy, but even now he just completely, irritates the left, because he believes in that, people deserve a vigorous defense. And B, he's like, hey, we have this thing called the Constitution and all these laws, and we got to follow. Like when he'll speak up on either side when people are when people or groups or classes of people are out of line. That doesn't matter whether it's Congress or the guy down the street.
Right. I certainly like Alan Dershowitz quite a bit. One of my favorite books of his is America on Trial.
Yeah.
I thought that was extremely well written, and for those that haven't read the book, it was Alan decided to take a look at the revolutionary time period, and in there he determined, okay, I'm going to put America on trial. Did the colonies have a legal right to break away from England based upon the different democratic philosophies that were accepted at that time? And he went through and like just bam, bam, bam. And the biggest thing he said, which really laid it all out, was the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson's writing. He broke down like every aspect and pointed to the different democratic philosophies that were out there at that time, specifically, Jonathan Locke and the that aspect of the social contract, and how King George was just breaking it like every step of the way of all these things that were founded within Europe at that time. And
Right.
I concluded that, yeah, the United States had, but it was the way in which Jefferson framed the Declaration of Independence. Like that was, in his mind, the greatest piece of American literature, so to speak, ever created, and nothing will ever top it, because it was just one complete argument the entire time.
Right. And I think that's, when I think today, certain groups of folks are trying to devalue the founders, because if you devalue the founders, you can devalue the documents. And you have to, like, for example, the Constitution, the only amendment that I ever hear an argument with that they say was clumsily written was the Second Amendment. Right. And it's like, no, they were very thoughtful, like commas, periods, semicolons, everything was put in there to excite you to think and to want to and to want to have a nation and it be greater, right? And doing a constitutional republic the way that we've done it is hard, because I look at Eastern Europe, right? When Eastern Europe kind of broke away from the Soviet Union in the 90s, nobody ever adopts our system of government. They largely adopt a parliamentarian system. Why? Because it's easy. It's easy to understand. What we do is difficult here.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have to say I slightly disagree. There's difficult, and then there's the United States.
America sucks until you go somewhere else, right?
Well, we did. What we're doing is still largely impossible.
Right. I mean, it's this 240 plus year experiment, right, of self governance, and we drift further and further away from that all the time, because it's easy to say, hey, we're going to let these other folks over here kind of take care of us, in air quotes, and it's that becomes the rub, right? That we start calling people, we stop calling them our representatives, and we start calling them our leaders.
Sorry, I just.
But that's whether people, it's like when you talk about being fearful, people are afraid to govern themselves, right? And I'd rather have somebody tell me what to do, and that's a significant portion of the population, right? And I think folks that resist that, to whatever measure that people can resist that, are frowned upon, right? And that's, I think, the people staying unafraid, so to speak, is in the face of the nuttiness that is the federal government these days. When you start looking at, I mean, just think about all the inflation and everything like that we've had in the last year, right? And people are just like, I mean, even Paul Krugman, who's by any measure is considered to be kind of a leftist economist, even he said he was wrong, that he's like, this inflation is not going to be transitory. Well, now he's becoming fearful. All right, because that's like, and people wait, and they're like, it'll be okay, because they're afraid to stand up and go, no, it's not going to be okay. We have to contract, we have to pull back, we have to give more, whatever that is. All right, and it's easy to see kind of today with what goes on in the government, because you get people like AOC saying the world's going to end in 13 years or 12 years, whatever it is. Right? Who believes that? All right, and I'll do it and this is how I stay largely unafraid, is if that were true, not one insurance company would indemnify a home. Or there'd be, a big, subsection G, paragraph 4. In the event that the world splits in half in 12 years, then we're not going to rebuild your home, right? Just like, to me, it's a common sense thing, right? And I think when you hear irrational things in life, whether it's the government or other, people that I think most of it is people walk away from common sense.
Well, here's even a big thing with that. Let's say, because this is just something that, from a business perspective,
right?
I don't know that the insurance companies would care. I think they would still indemnify you, and here's the reason why. Because I believe even homeowners insurance in that case is still done state by state, like health insurance, and each one is a separate LLC. And so all they would do in that particular state is go bankrupt. Like, I'm just not paying. They're just not going to pay out. And then boom, done. They've collected all their money and go. Because if all of a sudden they didn't pay out and I'm still stuck for the mortgage, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to declare bankruptcy myself, and I'm not going to pay back the bank. So who winds up holding the risk? The bank.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. It's like there's businesses and nobody's worried about it. It's like I understand what you want to have happen. But like, how are we making it happen, right? Yeah. And I think it's and I think you bring up when you start talking about the founding documents, so like we've done this 240-year experiment. And I don't think we're doing it well right now. On either side, what I mean?
Well, I don't know that we're not doing it well. I mean, I haven't really placed a lot of time. I've been a little bit tied up doing some other things, but I'd be curious if going back throughout the different decades, I'm almost wondering is do things just appear to be in much dire straits because we have instantaneous access and are overwhelmed with information, and everyone's trying to get those sound bites.
Well, I think that has something to do with it because now we put a microphone in front of elected officials and they're supposed to say something engaging and intelligent 24 hours a day. Right. And so that's, and consensus doesn't equal ratings. Right. And so when things, if everything's going, well, let me put it this way. So in the 80s, for example, Reagan realized that he had to do something in 82, 83, or he probably wouldn't get elected. So he went to Tip O'Neill, who was a titan as an American, as a Speaker of the House, and famously quoted, "All politics is local." They worked together to get a positive outcome for the nation. Right. Fast forward to when Clinton was president. He's not getting elected again in 96. If in 94 he doesn't figure out how to, deal with inflation, deal with some of the economic what's going on. Newt Gingrich was like, "Hey, we just got elected on this thing," and so they worked together for the betterment of the U.S. We don't have that anymore, or lately, right? Everything is about the win. All right, if you listen to Tulsi Gabbard, she's like, "Yeah, you get elected to Congress, and you take a picture of the freshman class, and then all of a sudden they segregate the Republicans and the Democrats from each other." Right. And now it's about getting a W for your side of the aisle, not doing what's correct for the American people in large measure. Right. And that, I think, is fueled by the 24-hour news cycle and the fact that dissent is great, but dissent also sells. Right. It's, it fuels ratings. And so we don't it's like you and I joke around when we're out there sometimes. It's like, this is why we can't have nice things as a nation, right? It's like, come on, folks, like, come on in and like all vote together for something just one time.
Yeah, I mean, I even go so far as when we start taking a look at just where the country is, I don't think it has so much to do with our politics. I think in large part we as a nation many years ago decided to allow the government to tell us what should be taught in schools. And, it used to be a high school education in the United States got you to a point to where you could make a healthy living. You could be considered true just middle class, and there's nothing wrong with being, middle class, to where the families are home every night, they're eating dinner together every night, they're taking the kids to, whatever, music recitals, sports, whatever, and, they're all there, and they had a positive outcome and contribution to society. Whereas then it became, no, if you're going to get that a little bit different, or if you're going to have that same thing, you had to have a bachelor's degree and take on a tremendous amount of debt, and not telling these kids what's going to make them money or not. Like, hey,
actually, if you go back, I mean, even when I got out of high school and went to college, going to the University of Massachusetts, all in with tuition, room, board, and everything was $6,000 a year.
Yeah, but that was 1812.
I think it's this. So there was no compulsory education, and the people that were going to school to in classrooms getting educated were learning how to be thinkers, how to be philosophers. They were learning the arts. They were learning history. Then, largely, huge endowments from Rockefeller and Carnegie at the turn of the century with the Industrial Revolution. We switched education from knowledge to teaching people how to be good workers, and giving them, enough of an education to where they could be productive in the workplace. And that, I think, more than anything else, is in the last now 100 years has changed the trajectory of the U.S.
Yeah, and I would say, and this is a big part that I think, many people don't look at, or at least think about. What made the United States, we'll say, superior to the rest of the world, was our capability of rolling up our sleeves and getting shit done.
Right. I mean, World War II, industrial might of World War II is probably the most stark example of that.
Right. And then everyone decided, oh, we're just going to be thinkers. Well, no. Not everyone is good at thinking. Not everyone is good at welding.
Right.
You need people who can take on those that are thinking, because most people that are really good at thinking suck at doing.
Right.
And we decided to try to make people do things that we made it seem as if it was beneath them. A plumber, no longer, good. And, I don't know that anyone's ever looked down on an electrician, because, that'll kill you. But, welding, sheet metal workers, HVAC, the trades, they went, oh, let's look down upon. Well, look at where we're at today.
We've now, for the last 40 years, since the 60s, for sure, have told kids that it's beneath you to work with your hands. The funny thing about it now is the trades in particular, there's a big gap, right? You have 50 and older effectively working there. And then now you're having these 22, 23, 24 years, because people are starting to gravitate. Why? Because now then there's a big gap in the middle, but because it pays well. Like the shipyards, Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia will pay you, I think it's $22 an hour to learn how to weld. And you're under no obligation to work there after they've trained you and given you a certificate.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine in Alabama. He jokes around. He's got 4 kids, and he's a PE guy, right? And he's like, 3 of his kids went to Ivy League schools, and he jokes around because he'll do the air quote thing. He goes, "My idiot kid," right? And he goes, "He's not an idiot because he's dumb. He fought the system going to school. Like he was very counter to what goes on." He goes, "He's a welder now. He went to the shipyard in Pascagoula to get his certificate." He goes, but he's back up in Birmingham, and he makes $350 a year driving his truck around welding. He goes, he makes more money than all my 3 smart kids put together.
Yeah.
There's a demand. There's a huge demand for the trades.
Right. And that's one of the things that we're like, this is, and I see this silly things on social media, and people go the simple question, 3 + 5 × 4. And they're like, oh, that's just, we're doing simple math here. Like, look, first, math isn't simple. Math is
doing arithmetic there. You're not doing math.
Right. Whenever you see multiplication, you do that first. Like when I was taught, as soon as you see anything multiplication, automatically start putting parentheses around the before and after, because I'm going, you do 5 × 4 first, and then +3.
Multiplication, division, addition, subtraction.
Right? Because this is the logic of the people. They take up their phone, they open the calculator, and they put in 3 + 5 × 4, and I go, see, this is what the number is. I'm like, no, you need to do the, put this like this is. I'm like, go to Microsoft Excel, because it understands the order of operations.
Right.
Equal sign, 3 + 5 × 4. Tell me what you get. Boom, there it is. Because you're using a simple calculator. Calculator just does left to right.
Yeah.
Now, if you do a scientific calculator and you put in the stuff, then it'll do it. But that's the large part of what the majority of the people in the United States are like, no, you're not doing simple math. Math's not simple. Math's complex. You break down complex according to a set of rules.
Well, now you'll have one of the things I don't know who was talking to a younger person, like they took a logic class from the philosophy department that they had to take to graduate. I'm like, well, did you take calculus? And they're like, no, or yes. And if they took calculus, I'm like, then you already know logic, right? You have to do things in a certain order, right? And and math is, mathematics is clean like that.
Yeah. I think There's
The whole thing in physics, 9.8 meters per second squared. It's the law.
yeah,
You can't get around it.
right. I said the only difference from that is that I would say that I believe that everyone in college should have to take both, because one, I mean, there are two different types of logic. One, when you're taking the philosophy of logic, it's about creating your arguments and how to
Right.
deconstruct, of a verbal or rather oral or written argument. Whereas math is a different kind of logic, and I think they're both extremely extremely important, because if I could do it all over again, my undergrad would absolutely, as a major, have been in philosophy. Absolutely would have been.
Like history and philosophy, are probably a disproportionate amount of the world's investment bankers majored in one of those two things, because they understand the arc of time and they understand the order of operations of life, as opposed to just things. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, I would probably still have minored in computer science, just because, and then I would have gone on to do my graduate degrees and still things like that.
He started out with with an English degree, and then said, "Hey, I'm gonna get my tech nerd thing going," and there you go, right?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. But then the funny thing is, I probably, with the amount of time I spent in the humanities, like that, I probably have read enough to, because I still enjoy. Like I was interviewing this one cat for a position, and the whole reason why I wanted to interview him, and I let my CTO kind of, I wouldn't say talk me out of it, but I didn't want to talk him into it because the person was going to work for him. But the whole reason why I wanted this guy is because his undergrad was in philosophy. And so I get in, I'm like, hey, I said, oh, your undergrad's in philosophy. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah. I'm like, I want to talk about Descartes. And he goes, well, he starts getting into it a little bit. He's like, oh man, I haven't thought about this in years. I was like, well, let's what's your feeling on the social contract that's described by Jonathan Locke in the 1700s? And great conversations. And I'm like, okay, now how did you get into technology? He goes, oh, it was quite simple. I'm a freshman, and getting ready to go into the summer, and on campus they had basically a help wanted sign to work in the computer center. And first it was just helping with some basic technology stuff, and then I got in there and I'm like, oh wow, wait a minute, I really like this. And then they had all these additional training, computer based training things, and did that. And so I added a minor to my degree to get a minor in computer science. And then after I graduated, I worked full time at the university for a while, and I'm like, that's what I like. I didn't know it. I got accepted for a job, and they were like, hey, we'll teach you. You just got to basically know how to use Google Workspace, at the time.
Yeah, I use a browser.
Right, and went on and the whole, and I was really I'm like, look, this is the guy we need. He's like, well, I don't know if he's technical enough. I'm like, I don't need him to be super technical. He's going to be a manager. I need him to be technical enough, but have a brain to be able to think about what could happen next.
Right.
And people who work in philosophy are constantly thinking. I need people in management that are thinkers,
right,
and can motivate those that are doers to get it done correctly the first time.
Yeah.
And the one candidate that he wanted, kind of fell through. I'm like, go back and, well, the guy already accepted a position elsewhere. I'm like, I said, all right, I'll talk to him. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I don't care if he's accepted a position elsewhere. I'll be like, I like, that's the guy. I'm telling you that, right? Yeah. Well, they want to do it. Because I always tell my people, look, I will just have veto power. Like they ultimately, but I was like, nah, this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit. Because to me, culture is the most important thing. And yeah, that gets back into when we were talking about before. Like if all of a sudden I had a couple $100 million in the bank, I'd be going to law school. I'd still be doing everything else. I just want to, because what I believe we have lost in the United States is we are, we look down upon those that are the underdog. And we love,
we look down on thinkers.
yeah, and we love to see people who are winning fail. We are celebrating failures rather than people's success. And I see this over and over again. And I just want to go and in many ways strangle those people. Like, look, you know, you should be the person who's like, I'll tell my people at work, the person that won that, what we call them a bright star, like employee of the month, go talk to them. Ask them, well, what did you do? You should be trying to figure out what they did that was different, and then how you can stand on their shoulders to make it even better. Like like when I was back in DC, and there was many times even at Silent Circle, and I don't know that I ever shared this with you or not, but there was many nights where I would go downtown DC, and I would walk from the Washington Monument across the street through the World War II Memorial. And I spent a lot of time at the World War II Memorial. One, I just think it's a beautiful, especially at night. But each of the, I don't know what you call them, let's call them a pillar for the moment, has a state and has a certain quote from someone throughout history of the United States.
Yeah.
And I would read every single one of them. And then eventually I would make my way past the pool to the Lincoln Memorial, back through the Korean Memorial, which at night's kind of creepy.
I love the Korean Memorial, and I love it at night.
Yeah, it's to me it's kind of creepy because the first time I did it at night, I thought someone was jumping out of the shadows at me. Because it's just the way it hits.
Because when you go, if you're starting from the Lincoln Memorial and you go to where kind of the street side entrance is, they've got that "Freedom Isn't Free" smashed in granite.
Yeah.
But the Korean Memorial, you know, that's kind of a forgotten war, right? Everybody makes a big deal about Vietnam, and everybody makes a big deal about World War II. And those veterans, I think, you know, those veterans more than anybody were just, you know, they are who they are in the statues, right? That if you look at those, they're all dead-eyed, right? And I like that on the granite that's to the right of it, or the marble that's to the right of it, you have like laser etched faces looking at them as they're walking through. You know, in this case, I think they were trying to imitate the Chosin Reservoir, right?
Yeah.
In that area. But it's DC to me is, you know, every day of the week you can go walk somewhere else and get inspired to be better tomorrow than you were today.
Yep. And that's what that World War II Memorial did to me. So when I would kind of go down there, because I'm going, wait a minute, how fortunate are we to be able to stand on the shoulders of these giants?
Oh, yeah.
It's not possible for me to fail. Like, it's all, these people faced more adversity than what I will ever face.
It's not just that. Like, they went and saved the world, and then they came back, didn't talk about it, and got busy building the greatest nation, you know, building the greatest economic engine in the 50s that we've ever seen. Right? And that to me is, you know, like when you know, I think it's, and I could be wrong in the numbers, but I think it's something like 3,000 World War II veterans die a day. Right? We're in there, and we're going to run out of them soon.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, look at Bob Dole. What a public servant. And then as a 90-some-year-old man who, you know, hobbled by injuries from World War II and the ravages of age, gets pushed up in a wheelchair next to George H.W. Bush's casket and has somebody stand him up so he can salute him. Where does that happen? Right? On the regular, right? And you have to think, like, we've got a 20-year, we have now a 20-year history of having been at war, and all of those veterans. Largely, we don't hear from them anymore. right? Me being one of them, like you get about the business of your life, right? And the edifices to that, in particular World War II, are just amazing to me because I've talked to World War II veterans that 4 or 5 of them have been members of the same country club for 50 years, and they never knew that they all fought in the Battle of the Coral Sea together on different ships because they just didn't talk about it. They came back and started, got busy getting educated. And I still think the way the GI Bill was done after World War II was probably the single greatest advantage that the U.S. had. Because you put adult men getting educated and going back out to the workforce to make businesses great, and by extension, make the country great.
Yeah, I unfortunately feel that we have lost that sensibility. We look down upon the underdog, and we want to keep the underdog down. Like we don't like it's you've got this huge amount of people in the middle that want to bring those that are winning down, and those that are below them, they want to keep them down. And all that does is just creates a perpetual cycle of where we're kind of at today. And I was at a Christmas party for the jiu-jitsu studio, and started off with the conversation started off with the aspect that no one should ever be walking around with a .22 handgun because it can't do anything. I'm like, well, that's a foolish statement. Well, you can, statistically speaking, it can bounce off someone's cranium because it's too thick. And I'm like, all right, everything's probability. And I'm like, well, if someone's mentally crazy, they're coming after you, it's not going to stop. You want stopping power, blah 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 blah. I'm like, all right, hold on. What's the probability that you're going to come into contact with someone like this? And they're like, oh, it's 50%. I'm like, okay, we've got 300 and roughly 50 million Americans, and you think 175 million of them are absolutely crazy that are a threat? Like 50%? Right? So 50% of the people in this room, and therefore you have, hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
No, well, not everything's probability. I'm like, okay, you're kind of losing me here because everything is probability. Everything. Right. The probability that an adverse action is going to occur, and for me to respond, I need to have X amount of force. Well, the probability of me coming across someone that's completely crazy, that's going to determine to try to break into my home, get past the dogs, get past the lights, get past the alarms, and keep coming, that's not a crazy person anymore. That's someone that is motivated to come do something more.
They're motivated for anything.
Yeah. I said, so like 50%? No, 50% of the people in the United States are not crazy. They just happen to be Democrats.
If they were, there would be wild lawlessness.
Yeah.
But more than there is today, right? I mean, and like I said, I always chuckle, especially when it comes to like firearms, right? Because if show me any of the laws that people want to pass that affect people that are legally having firearms, right? We have a mental health problem in this country.
Do we though?
Right. I think so. I think that folks live on the edge a lot more than we probably think they do.
Well, that might be true, but what would you say is a problem statistically? 1%, 5%, 10%? Because I think we're talking in the tenths of a percent of people that would be considered like a true mental health issue.
I think it's probably a little bit more. I don't think it's statistically enough that when it becomes relevant.
Yeah, I mean, 1 million people is a lot of people.
Well, yeah.
Even though it's like
when they talk about Islam and jihadists, right? They're saying even like by the most conservative thing, like that of the 1.2, 1.3 billion Arabs that are people of the Muslim faith, that 300 million of our potential jihadists, right? That's a huge number.
Yeah, it's a huge number, small percent, but this is where that aspect of percent versus number.
Like 1% of 7 billion is a big number, right?
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but you know, dealing with mental health in this country is difficult, or any country, but like, because how do we approach that, right? You look at homelessness most times is a crisis of mental health. It's not a crisis of I don't have a place to live, right? And and then that begats drug abuse, that begats everything else, right? Because now some people are looking to escape, right? And whether it's through alcohol, drugs, you're getting to a point where people become fearful, right? And then they don't know how to, quite a few times when people get to a point where they're fearful enough, they lose the ability to react in a way that we say is consistent with good behavior.
Yeah.
In society.
I think where I don't know that we have a mental health problem, but I think we're on the cusp of it. And here's why. The amount of a dopamine fix that kids get from technology, and when something negative happens to them on social media, it is compounded because it can, so to speak, go viral even within that community. Like everyone knows about it so quickly. And then that aspect already at a very sensitive point in these, teenagers' lives, they're going through all this hormonal changes. All of these things are happening, and all of that dopamine aspect all at once, and something bad happens. And then that can just keep compounding over the years. I think very soon we will have a true mental breakdown of the youth, and let's be unfortunately real in that the mass shooting events that occur are happening from kids that are going to those schools that wind up getting unauthorized access to a firearm, right? That's the key. Like no one's really talking about that point. Not one of these kids that have done any mass shooting event was authorized to have access to that gun.
Right.
That's the issue.
What's the latest one where they rounded up the parents too, because the parents basically didn't properly secure the firearms in the house?
As they should.
No, I know. I totally agree with you, right? It's like, like I said, to me that I was like, yeah, get after them, right? Like, what are you thinking about, right?
All of my firearms are locked in biometric safes. I mean, all I had to do is swipe it, and I can get in.
Right. No doubt. Yeah.
But
this the technology, the hit of technology, and then you take over the last year two now, that where a lot of schools have not been in person because of COVID, you're taking away kids physically socializing with each other, and that becomes even more. And so now they're physically and emotionally more isolated, but what they see in technology is a curation of someone's life, right? How many, the old joke is, how many selfies do you have to take before you get the right one and post it?
Just one.
Yeah, you personally, but I'm saying in general, when you look around, right?
I can't take a bad picture of myself.
Oh, yeah. I think I'm a bit nauseous now. Oh, my tummy hurts.
Yeah. Well, in re-summarizing like the aspect of the show, fear, and almost all of these things, all of these adverse things that occur, was because we allowed someone, maybe even including ourselves, to talk us out of doing the right thing the right way because of something most likely irrational, that we shouldn't do it. Oh, you shouldn't do that because this,
Right.
this is going to happen. One of the people commented, fear is the biggest liar.
Yeah, no doubt. I've talked about this before, that when I was in school, I hated majoring in engineering. I didn't know that. I did it because my parents were like, "Hey, that's how you get a good job," blah, And I came home and I said I wanted to switch my major to the classics, and my mom looked at me, her worldview ended at the mailbox, right? And And she said, why would you ever want to get a job where you couldn't be employed? Because she couldn't imagine like that. She couldn't imagine it didn't have a clearly defined A to B, right? And being a Depression era kid, to her, it was all about like, hey, go get an engineering degree because you can always have a job, right? And I think that statement of like everything has to be outcome based, right? Well, now with education, because it is expensive and people unload enormous debt to go get educated. What's the there has to be something at the end of it, right? Whereas what's learning about, right? And we talk, it's like, hey, that the guy that you want to hire, like, he was doing something else, said, hey, I enjoy this. There are great with the internet now that they can go learn, right? And it's about being a lifelong learner. And I think if you adopt that the lifelong learning aspect of things, you become less fearful, because you always know, if you don't know something, you always know there's a path to know it.
Yeah. If I was going to say I'm fearful of something, it happens to be what my great grandkids are going to become. And here's the reason why I think about this more. I was reading this one thing that this one guy basically saying, my great grandfather had to walk every day to work. My grandfather got to drive to work. My father got to drive a Cadillac. I'm driving a Mercedes. My son will have or maybe he drove something else, and my son will drive a Mercedes. My grandson will drive a Ferrari, and my great grandson will be back walking to work.
Yeah, I saw that recently. Yeah.
And then I started thinking, I wonder whatever happened to Albert Einstein's lineage. So I looked it up. His son was a professor, like at University of California or something like that. Grandson, professor, but not of note. Nothing past that. Like, it stopped. And I started going, wow, here's one of the greatest minds to ever live. And it just, people stopped having to face adversity and therefore reverted back almost to that of, like, in a way, an infant.
Yeah, but it's like a significant portion of extremely wealthy people, billionaires, they don't leave a lot of money to their kids. Right? They're like, hey, they're, in struggle is success. Right? And I think because you have to address your fears and things like that.
Yeah.
Right? And you could be angry about it, but you have to come to grips with that. I mean, I have a friend of mine, he's a 2-star admiral. He's going to be a 4-star admiral. And a member of his family has been on active duty since, I think, 1858. And they're all admirals, right? Neither one of his children want anything to do with the Navy. So from the 1850s till today, that lineage has never been broken. It is now, because those kids are all getting to be young adults and they went to other schools and they want nothing to do with the Navy.
Yeah. And I was listening to this one thing from Shaquille O'Neal, like his kid wants a car or something like that. And he's like, hey, Dad, come on, we're rich. He goes, no. I'm rich.
Exactly. Yeah.
And and my kids, the same thing. They're like, oh, they see the cars that I drive, and they're like, why am I driving the Subaru? Well, because that's what I started with.
Because you're 20 years old.
All right.
Relax.
And I'm going, and this is the only thing you're getting from here out. Now I will give you advice. I'm here to advise you. You've got to do it. I struggled.
So think about this though. Like, when it's like, oh, why do I get a Subaru? Because they're, he's looking at, they're looking at their friends on social media, some of which got, nice cars and nicer cars and stuff like that. I mean, my first car was a 1968 Mercury Montego MX station wagon. And you know what? I was damn glad not to be walking anywhere or riding my bike.
Mine was a 1982 powder blue Subaru station wagon before they had, and it wasn't really technically a station wagon. Basically, you could say it's like a hatchback, a 4-door hatchback. And that was before all Subarus had all-wheel drive. Right? That was my first car. And
you were damn glad to be driving it around because you weren't walking anywhere.
Yeah,
You weren't wearing out shoes, as my dad would say.
Yeah, and that's why my kids are getting a Subaru. I mean, my oldest already has one. Middle son will be the, same type of deal. Like, all right, that's what you're getting. And from there, you're, it's time for you to, figure it out. Like, I'm here to advise you, but you're going to struggle no matter what it is. You're going to face adversity, and you're going to have to figure it out.
Right. And I think a lot of parents, I think that's the hard part, is to watch your kids struggle. And I think you need to be a concerned bystander with their future, and basically every now and then nudge them back into the middle of the road, so to speak. But everybody needs to, you have to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps to a certain extent and really figure it out, right?
Yeah, sure.
And, I think in Indian culture, when they talk about education, they're like, you can have fun when you're 25 after you have your master's degree.
Yeah. You got to do the things you have to do so you can do the things you want to do. So what was the first car you bought? I'll say first new car.
A Toyota truck, little Toyota. They weren't called Tacomas back then, but it was the smallest of the little Toyota trucks.
Yeah.
2-door.
Mine was a 1993.
No air conditioning in it, because that was going to be like an extra few $100, and I'll roll the windows down.
Mine was a 1993 purple Geostorm.
The Geostorm. I don't even know what that looks like.
Does it
look like a Yugo?
No, it was kind of like it was a 2-door, 2-door car. It was I want to say it was a joint venture between, Toyota and Chevy at the time.
Did you get a discount because it was purple?
No, I wanted it purple. Purple's the color of royalty.
Along with your hair?
Oh, no, I didn't. My hair definitely was never purple. But yeah, it was, love driving that car. It was kind of, it was fun, but you definitely, I was coming, because it's the only purple car in here.
That car, it's in the greater Beltway area. You were,
yeah.
There's the purple guy.
Yeah, but here's the thing. It was, I bought it. Like my parents didn't buy it for me. Yep. I mean, they co-signed on the loan, but it was mine.
Yeah.
And and hey, I still remember that. Still remember doing it. And it was fun.
Not mine. Like I said, it was like, you look back then, it's like, now you're like, hey, I can buy whatever I want, right? But back then I was like, I got the manual transmission because it was cheaper than the automatic. I got the thing, and it had like kind of the white steel rims on it, and it was a 4-wheel drive, and up in New England, it was pretty much, you wanted that because of the weather and stuff like that. But went on the lot, did everything I could do to be able to afford it, and being able to afford it didn't include air conditioning or anything fancy. It was a bench seat and a manual transmission. I couldn't have been happier.
Yeah. So for me, the debate was either do manual transmission and have power windows, or automatic transmission and manual windows. I'm like, I want the power windows.
And I'll tell you what, especially growing up in the DC area, you're making a serious commitment with your left leg on a clutch in traffic to have a manual transmission.
Well, back then, since I was in Annapolis, I wasn't having to go into DC, so it wasn't bad. Though, as soon as I started working at XM Radio, that's when I traded in the car and got an automatic transmission. Because now I'm going to DC traffic. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. All the my left leg looked like Popeye's arms, where my right leg looked like olive oil.
Yeah, no doubt.
Awesome. All right, my friend. Good as always. Catch up.
Have a great week.
You have, since I don't think, what is today? Today is the 19th. Yeah, so I won't see you before Christmas, so have a Merry Christmas.
You as well.
And we'll talk soon.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Everyone, take care.